Now, the rest of the story.
So I'm cutting hay, and I'm finishing up on Dad's hay for the year. This is that new seeding strip that we put in down at my place, and the alfalfa that came back on it. It's not doing too bad for, first year alfalfa. I mean, just a little bit of weeds in it, but I'm not really worried about it because by next year the alfalfa should pretty well have them shaded out. It's the last day of August, which means we're actually kind of early as far as getting this stuff made. Usually it's the first or second week of September, but with the weather forecast being as nice as it is, I mean, I don't think there's any rain in the forecast actually. The next chance is like Wednesday of next week, or in 7 days. So we don't need 7 days to get this stuff dry. And all we'll have left is the valley, which is about 120 acres. Then we got potentially some fourth cutting of Ryan's if it gets enough growth here before a freeze. Because the rule of thumb Grandpa always said, you guys heard me say it before on the channel, that he always said that by September 15th you shouldn't cut alfalfa after the 15th of September, because then you run the risk of getting an early frost and potentially killing off your alfalfa stand before it has the time to build back any of the nutrients in the plant and in the roots, so it can actually survive a winter. So that's generally the rule of thumb we try to go by. I mean, when it comes to the grass, grass is grass. I don't really worry about it. And I'm just outright ignoring that rule when it comes to the valley, because I'll be making that the 3rd or 4th week of September. Ideally, I don't want to be making it in October, but it needs a little bit of growing on it yet. And with the weather forecast looking like it is, it should get it. I'm gonna head back down there. I gotta take the 4-wheeler down. I've just been taking the truck and walking across it. But where I need to go, I don't really want to drive the truck that close to it, because I'm gonna run over a lot of material. As in, what I'm saying is there's no actual established field road down to it. And I'd like to take the 4-wheeler down versus having to walk it, because that'd be a long walk. I want to go see where those low-lying areas are doing down there. The areas that you saw me clean off last year with the brush mower, and then I was able to make 100% of the valley last fall, for the last cutting. I want to do that again this year. If I can't, I'm still going to wait until it freezes, and then after corn harvest, because I'll be running around with that rhino cutter cutting corn stalks and everything. I'm going to go down there and I'll grind up as much of that swampy area as I can, because I don't want it to keep growing and growing and growing and then maturing and then regrowing, and then you just get a heavy mat of material where that ground can't breathe, so that any water that accumulates there, it doesn't get the sun hitting it to a hot enough degree to where it actually dries it up. And I'm paying for everything down there. It's how it is, how it's set up. So I'm paying for that ground that is currently standing in water. I mean, that's not necessarily the best way to think of it. I'm essentially paying for the right to make it. Now, the variable is, how much can I make, right? And that mole plow is, if used efficiently or properly, that mole plow should allow me to unlock those last 5 to 7 acres. Because what I want to do, we get this stuff made this week, then Dad and Ryan are we're pretty well done. I got some pasture and some waterway stuff of my own that I also cut. So essentially all we got is 120 acres, the valley. The field of Ryan's that if we have to make after it freezes, if it does come back, it gets enough growth on it, it'll have to freeze, and then we can make it, because once it freezes, you don't worried about the making it after it freezes. You don't have to worry about the plant, winter killing. What I'd like to do is see if there's any standing water down at the valley, and then before the final cut down there, I'll take that mold plow down and I'll drop it down in that water, back up to it with this, drop it in the water, and then give it away for it to drain away, and at least try to get the ground to firm up enough in the next 2 weeks or so where I can get across it and make it, or do something with it. Even if I can't make it, like ground bale it or cut it, at least get that standing water off of it, so when it does get cold enough this fall, it does freeze properly to where it'll support the tractor driving across it, and I can go through and cut it. So a mat of residue, at least that's ground up, turned into mulch, is better than just a huge mat of just standing grass that just, it intermeshes, and it's no good. It doesn't do me any good. And then ideally, even if I can make 100% of the bottom, because it's getting kind of dry here, I'll still go down with the mold plow, and I'm still going to hit all of the areas I feel need to be hit with that to make sure that they are going to be able to dry out. Because the Farmer's Almanac, for those of you that keep track of what the Farmer's Almanac says, it's calling for above average snowfall and above average or colder weather. Whether or not that holds true, I don't know. There's people that swear by what the almanac says. I'm more in the camp of you don't really have to worry about it until it happens. Be prepared for the worst and deal with the rest. And by going through and having that bottom all subsoiled with poor man's tile, if we do get a lot of snow, even a lot of snow like north of us, I have to worry about that bottom flooding in the spring. That's my biggest time of the year where I worry about it flooding, is actually early in the spring, because then if that happens, I can't put my fertilizer down, and then I'm running with no fert for my first cutting. So ideally I'd like to not have to worry about that, and I'm just doing everything I can to make sure that I'm stacking the deck in my favor, I guess. So it's same thing like we're looking for next year for row crops, trying to get all the tillage done, the primary tillage done in the fall. Chisel plowing in the spring I don't like doing. I like getting everything worked in the fall, so that way when it freezes in the winter, you get the freeze-thaw effect with the ground being fractured, and it helps with compaction, and the ground works so much nicer in the spring if you have it worked chiseled in the fall. It just does. You don't get the clods quite so much. That was a rock. And there it went. But having all this stuff done, cut, rigged, and baled here in the next few days, that's going to give us a very precious 2 weeks, give or take, to work on some of those random projects that we are still trying to get done. Between getting posts pounded, working on the planter, working on the corn head. The combine itself is done. Essentially, all I got to do to that is the cab needs to be blown out. The the windows need to be washed, and the combine needs to be washed and waxed, which that won't really take too much with the foam and everything we have. The corn head, that hopefully will only be like a half a day, maybe a day job, going through and changing the rolls on that. And then the planter, I've been told it's going to be a couple days. But the nice thing about the planter, other than, you know, the dollar signs associated with it, is that the benefits of doing that so outweigh any of the negatives, you know, the dollar signs associated with it. The reason I say that is because, like, when we go to plant next year, Andrew's going to be able to make a planting map, variable rated, from 32,000 all the way up to 38,000 seeds per acre, if that's the range we're going to go. And then he's able to look at our previous year's harvest data, and the more years the better, because then they can stack that data and make a variable rate planting map across the field. So you're getting the appropriate population for the appropriate areas of the field that can yield, and the areas that don't need as many plants on it or can't support as many plants on them, you drop the population back. I think that is going to be extremely important for us for unlocking the next tiers of yield potential on a lot of our farms. This one in particular is, you know, Rock City Central and the 40. It's got areas where it's got great, beautiful running, where it's hit like 230 bushels to the acre, and then you go 2 passes down and you're down to 180. So having a planter that's able to, with the hydraulic downforce, it's getting the seed to the depth it needs to be, with the electronic drives with the belt delivery system on it. It's taking that seed from the vacuum meter, so your singulation is over 99%. So every seed, another rock, stinking rocks. So every seed is spaced out appropriately to the right distance from each other. So you get the right depth, the right distance apart. And then the planter is able to increase or decrease the population, or how many seeds it's putting down per acre. And you should have a beautiful picket fence stand with every plant given the best potential you as a farmer can give it to produce the best yield possible. We can't keep farming like we're in the 70s like my grandpa did. You got to be willing to improve, you got to be willing to change. And granted, I wish I wasn't having to put this stuff on this planter, but it's what we got. It's been a good planter. It's light, but we're going to address that. I would just prefer CCS, Central Commodity System, you know, the big tank on it. That would really speed up, you know, soybeans for sure, and even for corn. We're getting up there in acres now where at least we can fill the planter and run. Because we still put the liquid down. I'm not getting away from putting the liquid down with the planter anytime soon. And about 40 acres of fill is about the best we can do. And that, at that point, but everything to the cultivating, to harvesting, to the planting, you just can't put stuff in the ground and hope for the best. You can't. I mean, look at the dollar signs that are involved with doing this. It knots up your stomach if you start realizing some of the numbers that you're really pushing just to produce a crop. I don't know. I think Grandpa would probably be pretty impressed. I mean, you wouldn't really think it, like the old timers, you know, they're stuck in their ways. Yeah, okay, I'd say that about my grandpa for sure. But at the same time, he did like new stuff, the new tractors and stuff like that. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. The first 100 hours on the 7600 when that showed up to the farm was not put on by me, my dad, or my brother, or my mom, my sister, my cousin Matt. No, Grandpapa. Grandpa ended up putting the first 100 hours and albeit the first scratch on the 7600. And I believe he enjoyed every minute of it. And I guess I got a taste of what it's like being the dad or the grandpa that buys you a piece of equipment, and then your grandson, your teenager, whatever, hops in it and then just starts heading for the horizon, because that's essentially what it felt like that year. Grandpa had a blast, and Grandma, granted, you guys, by then Grandma's having her health stuff, but Grandma would sit right there with him, and she would ride all day long and was completely in her element. Did not bother Grandma one bit. So, yeah, she could easily fit right here if she wanted to. She's a little lady. But, I don't know. I do miss Grandma a lot. I mean, to be honest with you, you don't realize that they're getting sick when you're at that age of your life until it's already too late, because by the time I started to realize that Grandma was fading, I was in school trying to keep from not flunking out and being held back, and I don't know. When you're a kid, it doesn't seem like life is really going by that fast, but in reality, it's already slipping away from you, and you don't even realize it, because by the time I got old enough and really realized and looked around and realized that your grandma that you grew up with is gone, that's kind of gut-wrenching. So I remember spending a lot of time with Grandma in the house, because even as a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, when you're not actively running the tractor or anything, you can only sit over here for so long as a kid with no cell phones, no... I was too young at that point, even like for the Game Boy, but you get bored. So you go to the house, and what do? You spend time with Grandma. And what would Grandma do? She would completely endorse the load the grandkids up on sugar and send them home to Mom and Dad. And she had no problem doing that, which we all appreciated and loved her for. Twix and Cheetos. My Grandma and Grandpa used to have a square Tupperware of Cheetos that Grandpa would always have in the living room. That's what he would snack on when he was watching TV at night. And as the grandkids, you'd go in and you'd chew down on Cheetos and those not the minis, but the full out Twix bars, and never heard them. Grandma never was a very vocal person. She never talked very much, but I honestly believe that she loved all of her grandkids. And I know none of the other grandkids are watching this, but Grandma did. Grandma and Grandpa really did love all of us. And that's probably where a lot of my hatred comes from, is because I was, my family, we saw a lot of that. And it's really gut-wrenching when you walk into the house and you see your grandparents, Grandma and Grandpa on separate occasions, unfortunately, crying because they miss their family, and their family wasn't coming around. So, I don't know. It makes me a little bit resentful because, people are making my grandparents cry when they were already going through enough as it was. So, anyway, Grandma always had the milk cart in the barn when she was milking growing up, and she always had M&Ms and stuff like that in there, and we'd always go raid it on her. She never minded. She never bothered. Never fussed. Grandma was great. And for young kids that you don't realize that you're already living the good old days when, in regards to bank